Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Rafi Zelikowski, and I work with our product consulting team based in London, England. And today's session is all about how to create and implement a corporate standard to increase adoption at your various organizations. How many of you have seen this dashboard before? Yes, great. So I would hope a lot of you. This is a default dashboard that gets shipped out with every single copy of Tableau Desktop. So if you have Tableau Desktop, you have access to this dashboard. And it's a beautiful dashboard. It uses all of Tableau's default fonts, default colors, best practice visualizations. But when I look at this dashboard, I think, what is the identity of this dashboard? Who was it built for? What does it represent? And those questions might not be so important to kind of the everyday desktop user, someone who's just trying to get quick answers or insights out of their data. But I hope that those questions are important to all of you, because ultimately, if we can't make a dashboard that has an identity and then is usable for our audience, then there's really no point, right? We can make 1,000 vizzes, and if no one wants to look at them, then we haven't really done anything worthwhile. So what I hope to kind of get out of this session, or hope that you can get out of this session, is how to take dashboards from the default and have them look and feel familiar and usable to your clients, whether it's internal users of Tableau or external users of Tableau. And this has really shown that if we produce something that looks and feels familiar to our end users, they're more likely to adopt it, they're more likely to use it, and they're more likely to actually trust it as a verified source of truth. So you may think, why is Rafi up here telling me about this? She works at Tableau. She's never had to convince anyone internally of how to use Tableau, because obviously at Tableau, we all use Tableau, and we all know what it is. And all our defaults are fine, because we know what our product looks like. But actually, a couple of years ago, a colleague and me participated in an internal version of IronViz. So does everyone know what IronViz competition is? Yes? Who's planning to go tomorrow? Yes, cool. I hope all of you go. And this taught me some important lessons about making content that actually felt branded. So my colleague Luca and I entered the competition, and this was actually our very first submission. It's literally just polygons of our faces, so it has zero analytic value. It just, on the tooltip, says, pick us for VizWiz. And despite having no value, we actually did make it past this round. And we made it to the final round of the competition. So this is Luca and myself presenting on stage. And unfortunately, in a very political decision, we lost out in the final round to our colleague Louis Archer, who actually now has to host the IronViz tomorrow. So I'm kind of happy I didn't win, because he's going to be doing it in front of like thousands of people. But if you go to IronViz tomorrow, give him a hard time. I'm just joking. But what else you can see from this is some of us handle losing a bit more graciously than others. This was literally the exact moment they said that Louis won. And I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad for me or to make you feel bad for Luca, because he obviously can't play poker while he's here in Vegas. But I wanted to show you a little bit about what we created and how I think this relates to what we're going to learn today. So these are just a few examples of the dashboards we made. I'm not going to comment on some of the political aspects of one of them. But I want you to kind of take away 3 themes from these dashboards that we're going to be talking about the rest of the session. So the first is being deliberate with your use of color. So this isn't just about what you may have already read about being considerate of what's best practice, right? So maybe limiting a certain number of colors on your dashboard. But it's really about making sure that you're taking advantage of what knowledge your users might already have. So using red for Republican and blue for Democrat is actually helping us increase our speed to insight, because we're capitalizing on the knowledge that our users already have. So we're not having to train them to learn something new in terms of association. The second is paying attention to your use of text. So we did this by making sure we were using custom fonts to give each of our dashboards a different look and feel. But we also used text deliberately interspersed with our visualizations to help tell our story. And having a contrast contrast of text and visuals increases absorption for your end users. Finally, we made sure to stay continuous with our brand. So you can see that we used that lame first entry of the faces as polygons as our kind of company logo on each of our dashboards. And we also included polygons on each of our workbooks. So what you can see is that we took 3 completely different data sets, completely different themes, but we made them each look like they were a product of Rafi and Luca. And that's really important to how you go about creating visualizations in your own organization. So again, those are the 3 themes that we're going to keep in mind for the rest of the session today. I do like things in 3s, so there's a couple exceptions to this, but I tried to keep things in 3s for the session. So today's session is going to be broken into 3 different parts. First, we'll talk about how to actually create a design in desktop without having to have a degree in graphic design, right? So Luca and I both work in technology. Neither one of us is an artist. So it's all about how to create a corporate design quickly in Tableau Desktop and for mobile devices. In the second section, we'll talk about how to make your work repeatable, so to reduce the time that you might spend getting everything to follow the corporate look and feel that you design. And the third is about increasing adoption by taking advantage, by taking advantage of Tableau Server or by embedding and using any internal portals or applications that you might already use at your company. One kind of caveat I have before we get started is that whatever you do to make your dashboard look and feel branded should never compromise or come before efficient design. So we're kind of operating under the assumption that you've already finished the analytic work in your visualization or in your dashboard, and that you've already thought about performance as the first factor. Because ultimately, if you make the prettiest dashboard in the world and it's slow, then no one's going to want to use it. So performance should always be the first thing you keep in mind, and there's many sessions at the conference here about that topic. When we go into looking at creating a formatted design in Tableau Desktop, again, I kind of have 3 rules. The first is keep it simple. So again, not just with color, which we've already talked about, but also in terms of the number of objects or items that you have on your dashboard. The second is begin at the end. So if you start to format or customize your work as you're going through your analytics, you're going to find yourself repeating a lot of work at the very end. So focus on your analytic flow first and answering all your questions, and then at the very end, you're going to want to start formatting. And the third is that I do actually have a best practice tip for the order in which you should format your dashboard, and we're going to look at this in a second, but if you have to remember anything today, it's just format from highest to lowest, and that's how you'll save the most time. Cool, so for the purpose of the desktop portion, I'm going to assume that I work at a small microbrewery. It's based in Springfield, Illinois. You might have heard of it. It's called Duff Beer. And here at Duff, we already know quite a lot about our consumer base. So they're kind of middle-aged yellow cartoons that drink our beer. But we don't know much about our competitors. So I've already built a dashboard that does some competitive analysis on other breweries that we might compete with, right? So we have the number of craft breweries per state, the average impact per capita, et cetera. And again, there's nothing wrong with this dashboard, right? It's already ready to be used. It has all the key information. But what we're here to do today is talk about how we can take this to the next level and start to make it feel ready to be consumed by my coworkers at Duff Beer. Okay, so let's get started. I will preface this by saying that the session won't be focused entirely on formatting. So if you want to learn more about what I do today, there are other sessions that focus on that entirely. So I'm going to go through the formatting part kind of quickly. So the first thing that I like to do when I look at a dashboard and I want to give it a custom look and feel is to bring in a logo or an image that's going to be my guiding principle. So for many of you, this will be your company logo. And of course, Duff, we already have a logo. So the layout of the dashboard is going to be one of the last things that I do. And if I don't really know where I want to put the logo yet, I want to bring it in as a floating object. So at the bottom left of your dashboard, menu, you'll have an option to bring in an image. And if I just hold down my Shift key as I drag that into my dashboard, then it will make it floating, and I don't need to decide right away where I want it to go. So I'll just drop that here and pick up my Duff logo. So now I already have my kind of guiding principle for the rest of the look and feel of my dashboard. Now I said format highest to lowest, and what I meant by that is if you start with the format menu that's at the very top of your toolbar, you just want to go from the top and go through all the options down to the bottom. And this is what's going to save you the most time and have you repeat the least amount of work. So the first option is to format your dashboard. I'll go ahead and select that. And the first thing I'm given is the option to choose my dashboard shading. So at Duff, I definitely want to go with a very extreme look for my company. So I'm going to use the option to be able to pick a screen color and just pick up that red color in my logo. So I don't have to go out of Tableau, figure out what that red color is, and then go back into Tableau. I can just use my screen picker, and that's why I bring the logo in first. All right, I can add this to my custom color so I can reuse it later. And the next thing we want to do is change all of the text on our dashboard. So this might be where you would go ahead and use a custom font that your organization or your company already has. Duff is still a startup. We don't have money to invest in our own font, so I'm just going to use one that I think goes with the kind of Duff feel. And go ahead and make this white so it stands out and make it a bit bigger. And the great thing about being able to do this all from the dashboard menu instead of going into each title and changing this is you're already saving the time it takes to open every text box and also having to remember what everything you set was as an option. All right, next up on our format menu is the option to format your workbook. So this is where you're going to change the text within all of your different worksheets. So again, I'll go into my fonts. And I think it's good to combine different fonts together, not necessarily keep everything the same font. I think if I made everything this Pacifico font, it'd be really hard to read. So I'm going to keep it at the Tableau default font and just make my font white. So I already know down the line that I'm going to have my entire dashboard shaded red. So I'm going to change my font here to white, and then maybe just change my tooltips back to not being white so that they can actually be red. Also on the workbook format menu is the option to format your lines. So this is really a personal decision of what you want your end look and feel to be. In this case, I'm just going to turn off a few of these to give you an example of what this looks like, but it will control all the lines in all of your worksheets. Next up on the format menu are these 5 options. So we're looking at font, alignment, shading, borders, and lines. And these are all worksheet specific. So to access these, the first thing I'm going to do is click on one of my worksheets. And then those 5 options will become available. So I'm going to change my shading, as we discussed, to the Duff red. And I'll shade my worksheet and my pane. And then I might also just want to remove some of those lines that kind of make this feel a bit more traditional. So I'll go in and remove my row divider, for example, and my column divider. Now that I've done that on one of my worksheets, I basically want those same options from the side pane on all of the worksheets in my dashboard. But instead of having to repeat that work, what I'm going to do is go to the sheet that I just formatted, right-click on that sheet, and select Copy Formatting. And now if I go to my other worksheets on my dashboard and right-click and say Paste Formatting, they're going to pick up everything that I set as an option in the side menu. So I only picked 2 or 3 things to change. Again, this isn't going to be a huge time saver, but if you imagine that you set up a lot of customization through the side menu, you can save a lot of time by using copy and paste formatting. The very last thing you want to do is make any changes to the worksheet that would be controlled by the marks card. So this you have to do on every individual worksheet. One thing that you might want to spend time on are your tooltips. I'm not going to spend time on them today, but they are an important part of that interplay between visual and text, so make sure you pay attention to your tooltips. What I am going to do is change the mark color, for example, to be gray, which goes a little bit more with our look and feel. And then I have a trick with maps to make them feel customized in the easiest way possible without having to change your map server. And the best way to do this is to go to your map menu and choose Map Layers, and just uncheck your base layer. So if you've shaded the worksheet and the pane on a map worksheet, on a map view, and then you uncheck the base layer, then you make the whole background of the map the custom color that you want. OK, I'll do similar things for the rest of my worksheets quickly. So just change my mark, for example, to white on this, and maybe make it circles so they're easier to see. And for my bars, again, make them white. On the bar, I also want to make sure that my labels are shown. And going back to that kind of concept of keeping things simple when it comes to dashboard design, this also has to do with the amount of extra information you're providing your users. So if I have labels on each of my bars, then I don't need a header, right? I don't need any axis that tells me what the values are because I'm already using labels. So you can remove that. Another thing I can remove is I already know that North Carolina, Florida, Ohio are all states. So I actually don't need this extra bit of text that tells me that this is a state. I can hide those field labels. Those are really small areas that you might think doesn't make a difference, but the more information you introduce to a dashboard, the longer it takes someone to consume the information. So those are things you want to start thinking about to make it more simple and easy to read. Lastly, with my high-level KPIs, I just want my numbers to stand out a bit more. So I'm going to do just a little trick by bringing my measure names onto my text and just hiding my header so that I have my numbers at the very top. And in the text box, I can format that text to be a bit bigger for the numbers. When you are working with formatting text, another way you can save time is you don't have to highlight the entire field you want to change if it comes in those kind of careted brackets. All you have to do is click anywhere within those brackets, and it will edit that entire field. So now I can make these numbers a bit bigger and make them stand out. OK, let's see how our dashboard looks. So far, I feel like it already looks a lot more customized, and we really haven't spent that much time on it. So the last thing we're going to do is look at the layout. Now, we have a quick filter here with all of the states, but we also already have a map of US states, so we don't really need both of those, right? Because I could go to my map, for example, and say that I want to use my map as a filter. And as soon as I do that, then I don't actually need this filter box because I can just click on a state, and it will do the same thing that that quick filter did. I may also want to bring my legend just a bit closer to the visualization that it references. Again, I'm going to use my Shift key to change this to floating. And then lastly, I'll just remove this kind of spacer where all those legends were. OK, since I've made my US map a filter, I want to give some instructions to my end user. So people who are seeing Tableau for the first time might not necessarily know that they can actually interact with the visualization. So as a desktop designer, you want to help them out by giving them some information. In this case, I might just want to put a subtitle here that just says, maybe in smaller letters, select a state to filter. All right, so hopefully that showed you. Actually, I might just move this. I can become a bit of a perfectionist with design. Sorry. I'll try not to spend too much time on it. OK. Hopefully that did show you, though, that in just, I think we only spent about 5 minutes on that, you can take a dashboard and make it feel a lot more customized and a lot more branded. So you don't actually have to spend a ton of time making your dashboards look and feel usable to your end users. As a reminder of what we kind of went over, these are, I messed up this one, so I don't have 3, I have 4. These are the 4 things that I think you should remember or take away from the desktop portion, which is to use the color picker and bring in your logo first to save time in customizing your dashboard. Pay attention to the format menu order, so start from top to bottom. Use copy-paste formatting to save time of what you choose on your side pane. And then finally, use actions instead of filters whenever possible to reduce the amount of clutter on your dashboard. So those were, or the Duff dashboard was a really stylized example. I'm not saying that you all need to go back and make these like cartoonish looking dashboards, but there are some real life examples that I wanted to show that I think embody those 3 principles we talked about in the beginning about color, text, and consistency. So the first one that I have is a story actually that is put out by KPMG. So every year they do an automotive survey. Is that right? Yeah. Every year they do an automotive survey, and they used to distribute this actually in PDF, like just giving people PDFs to read. And they now distribute it as a Tableau story on Tableau Public. So you can all go and look at this later. And I think they do a really great job of combining visualizations and text. So using text kind of purposefully to add context to their visuals, and also to give, kind of using the visualizations to give space between all the text. So you're not just having text and then just seeing visuals, but you're combining the two to enrich your user experience. An example of a great use of color that I found was this dashboard by Zillow. So it's looking at mortgage affordability and rent affordability in the US. And they've kind of trained users to think that blue signifies mortgage affordability and green is rent affordability. And then in another one of their visualizations, when they're looking at those factors over time, they're using shades of those same colors. Instead of training our eye to have to learn new information, new colors, we can already see that shades of blue are different years for mortgages and shades of green are different years for rent. My last example comes again from Tableau Public, and this is the page of a newspaper in Argentina. And I thought this was a great use case for consistency because the people that are making these visualizations are using completely different data sets, having to incorporate them in many different news stories. But when you look at their page as a whole, you can already feel like that they have an identity in their visualizations, right? You can feel like if you saw a new visualization, you would already be able to identify that it came from this specific newspaper. Now that we've made a kind of corporate design in Tableau Desktop, we want to think about all the different ways that our end users are going to consume this dashboard. So one of the big ways that we see a lot of users starting to consume information is on their mobile device. And it's really important for you to think about this because if you make a great looking dashboard in Tableau Desktop and then it doesn't render well on the end device that someone's going to be using, then again, that impacts user experience. So we're going to go through and look at how Tableau helps us achieve this by using the device-specific designer. If I go back to my Duff starter dashboard, the way that you're going to go about this is to choose the option on the left that says Device Preview. And as soon as I select this, then Tableau puts up different device types. So I can make a specific device for a tablet or for a phone. And I can even choose a phone model. So I'll go ahead and choose, there's no iPhone 8 yet, so I'll go ahead and choose iPhone 7. And then you want to say that you want to add this phone layout. So as soon as I select that button, then on the left, I'll see I have my default dashboard still, so I can still see what my default dashboard looks like. And I have my phone option. So we're not making separate dashboards. We're taking one dashboard and providing different layouts for it, so that when the user accesses that dashboard, Tableau is automatically going to serve up the format or the size that fits best to the device that they're looking at the dashboard on. So once I've sized this to the phone, I do need to make some changes. And I think the easiest thing with a phone to do is to say that you want the dashboard to fit width, and then to make the dashboard longer. Because with mobile devices, users are already trained to scroll up and down with their phones. We're really used to that action. But scrolling left and right is not an intuitive experience. It's not something we like to do. So you want to make sure that everything fits on one screen width-wise, but you do have some room for being able to add additional information for when you scroll down. So once I scroll, I'm going to go ahead and move some of my sheets. So maybe I want to move my bar chart down at the bottom. I can remove some of my legends and some of my filters because maybe for a mobile device you just want a quick look at your dashboard. And again, I might remove my logo because I don't need that here. So Anything that I remove from the phone or the mobile version of this is not going to impact my default dashboard. If I go back to my default, it's going to look exactly the same. So the way the device designer works is everything that you want on any of your designs has to exist on the default version, but then on the phone or the laptop or the other models, you can remove or move around objects. Cool. I do have a few things to keep in mind. I'm not going to go through each of these and what these look like, but just things to keep in mind when you're designing on mobile. The first is sometimes when you have long lists of information, you don't necessarily need to present that to your user right away. So that long list of 50 states, I might instead want to introduce something like a parameter, which will let my users choose whether they want to see the top 5 states or the top 10 states, so that right away when they open on a mobile device, they're not having to see all that information at once. The second is size to the smallest font that you need. So you can make changes to what items are on the dashboard, but with Device Designer, you can't change size. So you want to make sure if you're using a very big font on your default version that it still looks OK on your mobile version. And finally, I have seen a lot of people who use Tableau actually go through the extra effort of creating a duplicate of their dashboard as the mobile version. This is an option if you can't get everything to look exactly how you want it to, but I would always consider this as a last resort. So do take advantage of the device designer because it saves you a lot of time and a lot of effort. Everyone's favorite part, templates. OK, we've made something beautiful in Tableau Desktop, and now we want to make sure that we never have to do it again, and that anyone else who's using desktop at our companies makes something that looks just as good. So this is where templates come in. And I get questions all the time about templating in Tableau, and when are we going to have templates out of the box. This isn't going to be a magic session where I reveal like a button that no one else knew existed and you can actually do it. But I do want to talk about different ways that you can start to make your work repeatable and help you save time, because there are quite a lot of things you can do that get you towards template creation. So the first section will be about how to create a template from work you've already done, and the second will be how you can actually get other people in your company to adopt templates that you've made. OK, so if we go back to our Duff starter, I think the best way to make a template is to start from a dashboard or a visualization that you've already made. So in this case, if we take our Duff competitive overview, I can start to change this to make it useful for someone else who's going to come in and make a new dashboard. So instead of a title, I might just put title goes here. I'll leave my logo where it is. And then I want to start creating placeholders for where visualizations and other objects are eventually going to go. So to do that, I'm going to take advantage of our horizontal or vertical layout containers. That's these objects here on the bottom left. And the way these are useful is I could bring in a container and place it next to where an existing visualization is. And then under layout, I can add a border to this container. So that means when someone else comes and copies this dashboard, they'll already know where they're supposed to drop a visualization in. So I can then go ahead and delete the existing visualization, and then I can go ahead and repeat that for where all the other vises are. I may also want to include some instructions. So for example, this top menu bar should be for, let's say, use for KPIs, legends, filters, or instructions, right? So giving some flexibility. And then eventually what you're going to end up with is something that might look like this, right? So it's a dashboard that someone can then go and make their own visualizations and drop those visualizations into this dashboard. Now, the second part of this is how does someone actually use this? What does that look like for another desktop user when you're sharing this with other people in your company? So I think what the ideal situation is to create basically a template workbook. And the starter for this might be just a page that tells your end user how to use this workbook, right? So if it's published on the server, you tell them to download it from the server. When you make a new dashboard, copy the dashboard from this template workbook into your own and paste the pages in. Then you would include your sample dashboard. And if you want to go a step further, you can actually make templates of the main visualization types that someone might use. So I've gone in here and made a template for a map viz type, for KPIs, for a scatter plot, bars, etc. And this could be using dummy data or using your own published data set on Tableau Server. But the reason this is useful is it gives someone a guiding principle of what their end visualization should look like. And they can also take advantage of the copy-paste formatting to get theirs as close as possible to the one that you've provided them in the template workbook. When it comes to adopting a template, I think every company kind of has their own method around this. It depends what communication around Tableau already looks like at your organization. So I definitely recommend that everyone go to one of the sessions we have at conference about building a center of excellence. But I do have kind of one example of what the workflow might look like if you want any ideas. So let's say I'm using Tableau Server, and I might already have a project that has all my templates. So within the project would be the template workbook, and a user could go into Tableau Server and download the template workbook, make their own analysis, copy the templates, and then publish to my Tableau Server. But they wouldn't be able to publish into a production environment, right? So they would only be able to publish to perhaps a project that's just meant for visualizations before they're kind of approved. And then either yourself as the template creator or someone who's a server admin would be the person that goes in and says whether content is now approved to be moved to production or not. So let's say I'm looking at this dashboard that someone published that looks at customer analysis, and it looks good, but they haven't used our custom font. They're not using the colors that we like. So this might be a case where I go back to the person that made this and say, hey, you might need to make a few changes before I can put this in production. If I go into another dashboard, though, I can see that this one has followed some of our guidelines, right? So we see they've used our font, they've used where we want all of our KPIs to go, our filters, et cetera. So then what I could do is select this dashboard and say, actually, I want to go ahead and move this to our production project. So that's one example of how the workflow might go. But when I was writing this session, I did actually contact a few different customers to figure out how they went about doing this. And one person I talked to, before I get to that, sorry, yeah, so this is the tips I have for the templates, so using containers to take up space for where vizzes should go, defining space for additional objects such as filters and legends, defining defaults for your data. So if you're not using a dummy data, if you're using data that everyone else is sharing, then make sure you're defining things like default colors so that they already have that built in. And then the final is leave instructions for use. So that should be kind of obvious, but making sure people actually know what to do with the template. OK, so back to kind of an example, or real-world example of what a template might look like. So I talked to Simon Beaumont. Simon works for the National Health Service in England, for one of the National Health Services. And they have over 20 desktop users. And those desktop users are servicing 3,000 different clinicians daily on Tableau Server. So what Simon was kind of talking to me about is how important it was for all of their work to follow a specific format, because a clinician wants to make sure that the data that they're accessing is kind of approved by the NHS Health Trust and is information that they know to be verifiable. So what he's done is actually create content around templates and also instructions around templates where everything is branded with both their brand and Tableau branding. And one thing I thought was cool that he did is they actually put different color palettes to mean or signify different reports. So all of their kind of pink reports had to do with patient experience, and all of their light green reports had to do with clinical data, so that when a user came in and looked at a dashboard, looked at data, they already knew what the subject of the report was by the color scheme. This is just an example of what one of the end dashboards look like. He's very friendly. You can contact him on Twitter. He'll tell you a lot of stuff. Cool. So the last kind of section is how to then take this the next step and share your visualizations with your end audience. If you are using Tableau Server, you might have noticed that there's already a lot that you can do in the server to make it feel customized. So if you notice the server that we were using before, it already has the Duff logo instead of the Tableau Server logo. And you can also add images or icons to all of the projects on your Tableau Server. Similarly, if I sign out, I also only see the Duff logo when I sign in. So when you're using Tableau Server, you can already kind of eliminate Tableau's branding to make this feel more branded to your own organization. And all this information can be found online if you just search for adding a custom logo to your Tableau Server. And it's very simple to do. But one more thing I wanted to talk about is use cases where you have users already going somewhere else to get their information. Because what research shows is that people are much more likely to adopt analytics or to adopt BI if it's integrated with something that they already use, rather than forcing them to go to a new place to get their information. So I think the best example of this is internal for us. Obviously, as I said before, at Tableau, everyone uses Tableau. And we, of course, like to analyze our own data on how we actually use Tableau. And what we found is that the most viewed or most used vizzes that we have on our own Tableau server are the ones that are integrated into Salesforce. So we have Salesforce.com as our CRM, and this is just a demo instance. And our salespeople will go in and look at an opportunity or look at a contact that they're talking to, and directly within that Salesforce site, they'll have analytics already embedded there. So you're not asking someone to go out of a system they're already using, go into a new application, and look for a visualization or analytics that's useful to them. You're bringing it to a system they already use. That's one example with Salesforce, but a lot of you at your own organizations might have your own custom portals or SharePoint, for example, and you can take this to a whole new level. So here at Duff, we have our own employee portal. This is where we go to get all of our information. It's where we have blogs that we write about. We have friend requests, so I can deny Luca as my friend because he made us lose VizWiz. Or I could go in and look at my analytics, right? So directly within my portal, I already have access to different dashboards, right? And I can click through and see my shipment analysis or my customer analysis. And I'm not seeing Tableau anywhere here, right? I'm just seeing Duff. I'm just seeing my Duff brand. Everything within this kind of frame here is served up by Tableau Server, but everything surrounding it is not Tableau. So even these buttons where I can say that I want to export my dashboard as a PDF, or I want to download my data, which I don't have permission to do, or save it as an image, I can do that all by taking advantage of the JavaScript API. So what the JavaScript API allows us to do is have a completely embedded and seamless user experience, but still be able to interact with our visualization. So it basically is a combination of HTML to kind of create these buttons that look like they're part of our portal, and then JavaScript behind the scenes is communicating to Tableau Server and saying, when someone selects this button, I want it to do this specific action to my visualization. Now, the ideal situation is that you might already have someone in your organization who has JavaScript skills to do this. But if they don't, we actually do provide a lot of information online to help you with this. So we have a JavaScript API tutorial, which actually will walk you through all the steps of what the code might look like and what happens when you run this code. So in this case, if I run this code, it will then serve up a visualization. Then in the next case, I could say I want to run a code to add a filter, and what does that do to my visualization? Again, the Duff employee portal, stylized example, not real world, but there are kind of real world applications of embedding. The first is one of our partners that I talked to in the UK. They actually sell Tableau as a product embedded in their own product, and for them it's really important to have a seamless experience so that when a customer signs in, they're looking at something that they feel is branded by kind of what they've bought into, not a separate product. Another example is a customer I've worked with called Iron Source, and they actually got their internal designers to design a portal that looked exactly like all of the other portals they already have internally. And for them, what they said was important that what they said was important for them was that a user could go in and look at really simple visualizations and not feel like they are kind of accosted with too much information. So you can actually see what they have here is a combination of filters that are within the visualization as well as buttons that are external to the visualization. So they can choose which reports they want to see. They can filter by time, or they can make changes internally to the visualization. So again, it's 4, not 3. I don't know why I said 3 in the beginning, but 4 things that hopefully you take away. First, obviously, is efficient design first. So you don't want to make a dashboard that's slow or that doesn't provide analytic value, or else there's no point in making it look good. The second is to use templates to save time. So take advantage of the fact that you invested that time to make the initial dashboard or visualization that looked good and actually be able to repeat that. The third is that don't forget that branding can actually increase adoption. So we're not just talking about making something look good. We're talking about making something that people want to use and that they feel is trustworthy. And finally, if you have existing platforms, take advantage of them. Bring the analytics to your users. Don't have to drive them to a new location to get their information. That was it for me. So we have time now for questions. If anyone has any questions. Yes. Yeah, so the question is about creating default color templates. So when you use a field that you don't have to change the color every time. So as you already mentioned, we do have the ability to add custom color palettes. But what you can do is basically on a field, you would go in and add a default property and change the default color property so that you would then assign the custom colors that you want, and every time you use that field, it's going to use the colors that you define as the default.
So the same thing we have to use because I mean to say, like, if I go to the next. Sorry.
That's fine.
So if right now I'm doing the bar chart. So next time I want to do the line chart with different metrics. So I want to use the same colors as a standard.
So you can only do that per color palette, so having custom palettes that you would assign, and then otherwise by assigning them to an individual field. So you can't say that every time I use any field for my data, I want it to be this color.
Okay, thank you.
As a follow-on of sorts to that question, is there a way to pass a custom palette embedded in a workbook, or some way that doesn't involve telling the other user to update their preferences file in this way?
Everyone heard the question because you're using a mic now. So when they download the workbook, the custom color palette will be saved as part of the Twibix file, the package workbook. That's why the workflow would be to publish a package workbook that has your custom color, and then when they download that, they'll have the colors that you define.
Okay, I get the idea of a production and a development projects. How do you prevent the developers from just giving access to a bunch of people access to their development site and their development project and bypass the whole concept?
That's a good question. I think that's more an internal politics question. I put some information on related sessions, but I think that would be a really good question for one of our customer speakers, because we have a few customer speakers that are doing sessions on Center of Excellence, and they might talk about some of the challenges they've had with server administration, making sure the right users are set up as having the right ability.
The format copy and paste, as well as the option to store the different device layouts. Do you know which version that was introduced in? We're on 10.2, so I don't know if it's a 10.4 feature or not.
It is a 10.2 feature. It's been around since,
okay,
the
so
copy-paste formatting has been around since I was here, which was 8.0, so
okay,
you should have it.
cool, thanks.
Sure. We have one Oh, maybe we'll go here first.
Thanks, Rafi. That was very helpful. So where I'm interested in is, are there any specific effective design principles for mobile devices? Because I work for Honeywell Financial Planning and Analysis, and we've been using Tableau for 3 years. We've been, I would say, having a fair bit of success in desktop dashboards and I would say server-based dashboards, right? However, where we struggle is if you have a lot of dimensionality, a lot of quick filters,
Yeah.
and if we transfer them over to mobile devices, I think the main cardinal rule is you'll have to use sheet filters there, right? So that limits your ability. So is it okay to have that many number of dashboards in mobile devices when you cut them down, or do you have any tips and tricks there?
Do you mean you have like navigation between
Yeah,
dashboards?
let's say you showed some KPIs, right?
Yeah.
Let's say I want to see it by lines of businesses, by regions, by different dimensions on the summary itself. So in a typical desktop dashboard, you can use quick filters, whereas when you transfer it over to a mobile device, they advise you to use sheet filters, right? So that's where you might have to use that many number of dashboards in a.
I actually think quick filters are easier on mobile devices than actions, because on a mobile device, tapping the screen will run the action, whereas and you might do it accidentally, and then you've filtered already, and you can't go back. So what I would say is the quick filters actually do give you the option to have pop-up of lists, and I think that's easier on mobile devices than filter actions.
Yeah. And are there any don'ts for I would say mobile design, something that you've heard as experiences from customers? Because you're just starting the journey on mobile device, so just want to understand.
Don't. One thing that I would say is don't put any information in the tooltip that they can't then see on the view, because tooltips are also a bit of a weird one on mobile devices. So if you have information that's necessary, keep it in the view rather than hiding it in the tooltip. Otherwise, just make sure it's legible and not too much information.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure, thanks.
Hi, great presentation, thank you.
Thanks.
I had some issues around when I'm designing the dashboard on my screen, and then when I publish it to the server, it comes out a little bit different. Like the font will be a little fuzzy or squished, or it won't fill up the whole screen on the server. Do you have any advice on dealing with that?
Yes, so the first one for fonts, if you're using a custom font, you need to make sure that that font is also installed on the server machine. Because if it isn't, then Tableau will then just pick a different font that's on there by default, and then each font has different sizing to it, so it can off-put the placement of objects. Otherwise, I would always make sure that you're using an exact size for the dashboard and not automatic sizing, because then you can control the resolution and what it should be before you publish. Sometimes it's not exactly the resolution that you can actually measure the resolution on your server browser, right? So sometimes you have to play around with it a bit, but that gives you more control than when you use automatic, especially like the placement of the items.
And how do you know what exact size to use? Isn't it different for everybody's screen, or is there a size for the server?
So I would test it on like the browser version that you're using, and then when it comes to the device designer, it will pick the resolution like at the next smallest level. So it will not present so like let's say I publish one that's like for laptop sizing, and then I look at it on a smaller laptop, it might give me the mobile device version rather than the laptop version. So it picks the size that's going to fit the best on the screen, given the resolution it detects.
Thank you.
Sure. If I didn't answer that exactly how you want it, I'll stay after.
Just a quick question. You can't do like watermarking, right? On like a dashboard, for example, putting a logo or some sort of like disclaimer at the bottom that the user cannot remove. You can't do that out of the box, right?
No, but you can add an image, and then depending on like if the people in your server don't have the permission to edit the workbook, then they won't be able to remove the watermark. So I would just add it as like if you add it as a PNG, then you can have it as a transparent image over the visualization. Basically, by default, you can't add an object that's always going to be on every dashboard, if that's what you're asking. Yeah. Okay.
Hi. My manager feels that when you drag the visualizations onto a dashboard, there isn't enough white space between each visualization. Are there any, I feel that when I drag the blank space and make it as small as possible, that it looks too chunky and too far apart.
This is a great question. Sorry to cut you off. I'm really excited. So in 10.4, you can now control the spacing on a pixel level between all of your visualizations. So let me go back to my Viz and show you. So if I went and selected any of my views and you go to layout, you now have all of these options to add padding. So you can add internal and external padding, and you can make it different sizes or equal sizes.
So
it's very exciting.
Padding. Is there an interim solution? Because our organization is currently on 10.2.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have shown you.
No, you give me a case for upgrading. That's good.
Just to use blank objects. That's what I did before to get spacing.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. By the way, if you guys want to go, just remember to do the survey. You don't have to stay. I feel kind of bad. Yeah, do the survey in the app. It will tell me how to make this session better for you. And then also go to Iron Viz tomorrow. It'll be lots of fun. Yes?
Just a quick question for you with regards to the server branding where you had the Duff logo in the middle on the server when you were signing in.
Yeah.
What actually controls that? Are there specific sizes that you can max out your branding, or can you do horizontal headers that would cover the entire screen, or are you limited to
There's a maximum size, but not a minimum size. So you can adjust the sizing. Basically, it's a tab admin function. So if you just search tab admin and look at the functions, you can change the header logo and the sign-in logo, and it will give you the dimensions. It'll give you the recommended dimensions and then the maximum, and then you can just size your image to be smaller if you want.
Hi, Safi. Hi. Do you know if there's an intention to add the possibility to have transparent objects on a dashboard, like worksheets, stuff like that?
I hope so. I don't know if it's coming. I know that I've talked to the developer that's in charge of dashboarding, and they know it's a big ask for customers. I don't know where it is on their list of priorities, but if you haven't already voted for it on the Tableau community as an idea, then you definitely should. One more there. Thanks.
Great presentation. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We've got a lot of tension internally. We've got a massive marketing department and a lot of big opinions about having instructional information on dashboards. So you used actually a bit of a combination here. Is there any best practice around when you should or when you shouldn't?
When do you think that you shouldn't?
I think you shouldn't ever have it on a dashboard. The dashboard should be entirely self-explanatory, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there's ways to kind of have the best of both worlds. So I don't know if you've seen any examples of this on public, but you can put like a sheet that just has an icon on it with like a question mark, and then have the tooltip tell you how to use the dashboard. I think that's the best way to have information that doesn't add clutter. But unless you have a really good strategy of teaching everyone how to use Tableau, I think some users will end up missing out if they don't know that they can interact with it. So it's a little bit of like an education piece as well as a how much are you willing to give up on design and layout. Sure. Yes, I can hear you from here. So if you have a font on your, so the question was if you can download custom fonts. Oh, the Tableau font. So the Tableau font cannot be downloaded specifically as a standalone font yet. So you'd have to upgrade to the version of Tableau where it was introduced. But other custom fonts, it will always pick up from your local machine. Yes?
Hi. You didn't really go over this when you were showing the dashboard design, but we use a lot of back buttons, and we typically just set it up as a completely separate sheet with an image and then make actions off of it. Has there been any thoughts about making that an out-of-the-box situation where there's back buttons?
It's coming.
Okay.
It's higher on the list than transparent worksheets. Anyone else?
So that first visualization you built, you were just using floating objects, the whole time with that? And then just later on, just kind of set up containers, just kind of as an organization?
I only had the logo as a, so the question was I using floating objects for the whole dashboard? I was only using the logo as a floating object, so most of my items were tiled. I would still say tiled is best practice in terms of sizing. Just when you bring them out onto the dashboard the first time, a worksheet's automatically added as a tiled object. Sure. Yes, sorry.
Thank you. If people have multiple desired layouts for a dashboard, so you had 2 on the left, 1 on the right, would you recommend trying to create more templates for 2, 2, and 2, 2, or 1 on top, 1 on the bottom, just having a bunch of those? Or would it just be easier to try to create a template that is a little bit more simple, that allows the user more flexibility on building out what they want, something that's not pre-built?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say it depends on the ability of your users to think, like be able to actually understand that they can put more than one worksheet into a container, for example, but also on how strict you want the design to be. So if you want to make sure that you only have dashboards that have either like a 4x4 layout or 2 on top of each other, then you should make templates for each of those. But if there is some flexibility on the placement, then I don't think you need to make templates for every possible combination of worksheets. So you could make a template of the one I showed, and instead of having a template for each of where the worksheet was, just have one box of being like, this is where all your worksheets will go, and then just being able to control the objects around the worksheets.
Hi. So we already have like tons of projects built out, and in each project we have like multiple workbooks, and our company has like 4 apps. Is there a way to, across all the workbooks, like one app is always red or just one color, and the other app is probably always green? Is that possible?
I'm not sure I understand the question, so maybe just if you want to stay after, we can catch up one-on-one. No? No more? Okay, we've slowly filtered to like a very small subset. Again, thank you so much for coming, for those of you that are still here, and enjoy the rest of conference. Thanks.